Our guest today is Elizabeth McCormick. Filmed for ABC News 2020, seen on MSNBC, and featured in Wall Street Journal, Elizabeth has empowered audiences all over America with her action-packed speaking. As a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, Elizabeth flew missions such as air assault rappelling, command and control, VIP and military intelligence. She has also supported UN peacekeeping operations in Kosovo as an S4 logistics officer in charge at the battalion level and receiving the Meritorious Service Medal for her excellence in service. A #1 best-selling author, Elizabeth co-wrote Succeeding in Spite of Everything. She is currently writing her 4th book and has more in development. To find out more about Elizabeth, go to her website at www.yourinspirationalspeaker.com. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for coming on Savvy today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on. I recently heard you on an interview, and I was really blown away with your story. Could you tell the audience a little bit about your journey and how you became a helicopter pilot? I myself was studying fixed wing. Why did you choose helicopter in particular?
Well, I had decided to join the Army because I was an unemployed military wife, and I couldn't get a job after 5 years of college, multiple degrees, and my starter husband followed him to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and when the only job I could get was working in a pizza place. After 5 years of college, I just knew there had to be something else for me, and when I decided to join the military, I wanted to do the coolest job ever. Unlike you, I had never even considered flying before, but the military, for the Army at least where we were, it's helicopters or nothing. There isn't really an option for fixed wing. You actually fly helicopters first, and then later you can decide to transfer into fixed wing.
Wow, and you would know better. I have not flown in a helicopter. Is it much more difficult to fly a helicopter than a fixed wing aircraft?
It is much more difficult to fly a helicopter. Airplanes, not that airplanes aren't hard and aren't worthy of, airplane pilots are definitely worthy of respect. All pilots have to go through, as you know, Christina, rigorous training, rigorous certifications, medical physicals, all kinds of things. But flying an airplane, you basically have the taxiing and the takeoff and then the landing, right?
Yeah.
The in the air time's pretty easy.
Straight and level, once you get it down, you learn it. Yep, not too hard.
Right. So in a helicopter, you have in the Black Hawk had tires and wheels, so we actually had ground taxiing, which was kind of like an airplane. And then we had hovering, which is the most difficult flight mode to learn, where you're 6 to 8 feet off the ground and you're like the bumblebee that shouldn't fly.
Wow.
Because there's so much weight and so much of the air that's circulating with the rotor system and the swirling around you that it's very unstable and difficult to fly in that mode. So then when you take off, though, you get a better aerodynamic force and it's easier to fly, but there's no autopilot. There's no, hey, I'm just going to relax for a little bit because it's a very, very touchy in the controls. And you're doing one thing with your right hand, another thing with your left hand, your feet, like an airplane, you're doing, the controls the thrust to the tail rotor, so you push, one pedal and it goes more power, and another pedal reduces power, and so you're doing 2 different things with each of your feet, and then you're talking to air traffic control.
Wow.
You're scanning your instruments, and because helicopters typically fly lower and slower, we fly usually around trees and what we call nap of the earth. We're constantly scanning for trees, power lines, obstacles.
Wow, you have a lot more to think about. And I didn't know that you guys didn't have autopilot, so you could get a little bit of a break at one point.
Oh, there's no break. We're also, I think every aircraft, at least for the military, is required to have 2 pilots on board at all times.
That's a good idea, especially since you have so much to do.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. I call it multitasking on steroids.
Wow.
Typically, people think multitasking is good, but multitasking is not good. You're brain actually only remembers one of the two things at a time. So have you ever driven home while you're talking on the phone or talking to somebody or doing something else while you're driving, and you get home and you have absolutely no recollection of how you got there?
Yes, absolutely. Good you bring up this multitasking part because I've heard people say, "Oh, no, I can text and drive. I can do this and that." I'm like, "No, you can't. Not well."
Right. Your brain is only wired to really do one thing well. So when you have that capacity of your brain and you divide it in half between two different tasks, or 40-60 or whatever percent it is, you're still not performing that main task well. Whether preferably the driving,
Yeah.
you do it focusing on that. So yeah, it's true. You just don't. Now with flying helicopters, after flying, the first year was really hard. I mean, because every day you have to, but you fly every single day, 5 days a week. And the good thing that we do that, because we have to learn how to multitask and handle that kind of pressure. And then they put you through emergency procedures and what if this happens and what if this happens? They instill that training into you so that you are prepared, and your capacity for multitasking, the capacity that your brain has to focus on multiple tasks, actually can stretch and it can grow, but it requires an extreme level of training and discipline to do that. Like we went through a year of flight school.
And that's a good thing to mention. A lot of people want to get out there, get a pilot license, but it's very important to practice continually. And that's the perk of getting into the military is Uncle Sam has you flying, as you said, every single day. So you're getting that practice you need every single day.
It does have that advantage. I don't know if many people would call joining the military an advantage. I mean, it was when we finished flight school, and now, mind you, it's been a while, and I know for a fact that flight school is different in how they do things now. I've talked to people that are going through it or have just gone through it, but they said that the cost of our flight training, the flight time, everything that we go through in Army flight school, if we were to do this in the civilian sector in helicopters, it'd be close to $1 million of training.
Wow, that's amazing. And I understand you had mentioned you ran into some difficulties while you were training in flight school. Would you like to share?
Well, I was the only girl in my class. And I say girl because I was 23, almost 24, and now I could say I was a girl. Back then I thought I was a woman, and I felt like a girl. And being the only female in the class wasn't really a big deal to me. But when I got through into flight school and we got to, you go through aeromed training and aerodynamic training, and then you learn the systems of the helicopter and the startup and all the procedures. And when I finally got to to the flight line, and my instructor for the flight line, he looks at me and he says, "Oh, great." I just knew I knew in that split second that I was in trouble. And I found out really, really fast that he did not believe that women should fly. And at the time, I didn't even really realize this until later, that at the time I didn't realize they'd only opened women and allowed women in to flight school and for helicopters for about 2 years. So it was still pretty new in the program, and there weren't a whole lot going through yet. So he was, oh, great. And I was like, uh-oh. So I mentioned earlier that hovering is the hardest thing to learn. And it really is. And you have the cyclic, which is the stick that comes up from the floor it's actually between your legs. And don't go dirty there.
No.
And then the cyclic connects to the rotor system up top, the big blade. And a very small movement of that cyclic translates to a very big movement in the rotor blade. And women helicopter pilots are actually, well, I don't even say that, women in general make the best helicopter pilots.
Why?
Because we have a softer touch. We're less likely to manhandle the cyclic and be softer and gentler with it, which is what is required in order to fly and smoothly, and especially to hover, where it's very touchy. Well, how easy is it to be soft and gentle and relaxed in your grip when someone is screaming at you?
Not very easy at all.
No. So I would go and try to hover, and he wouldn't teach me because he didn't want me to pass. So he would scream at me, and he would tell me I was wasting his time. I'm stupid. Let me change that language to what he said. You're stupid. You don't know what you're doing. You're wasting your time. My time. What makes you think you deserve to be here? A monkey can fly better than you. Every day.
Wow.
The first week, it's not so bad. Hovering is hard, and nobody else is doing it yet. The second week, it was still bad for me, but I still wasn't the only one, just almost. The third week, I'm the only one who can't hover. And my grade sheet every day is a U for unsatisfactory. Week 4 is the halfway point of the course, and I'm still the only one who isn't hovering, and my grade sheets are U. Week 5, I asked for an instructor change. No. Could I? No. Could I? No. Anything I suggested was denied. Week 6, I am dejected but not broken, and I just refused to quit. It was not going to happen. I was not going to quit. I was not going to let someone else's limiting belief stand in the way of what I believed in. And I believed that I was meant to go through this school and do this.
Kudos.
So week 7, I walk in, and you know how you walk in and your body language is dejected, your shoulders are down, you're just, I had no idea how this was going to happen. I mean, we only had 2 weeks left. And I walk in, and I look up, and the instructor pilot is not there. It's a substitute. So, woohoo!
Yay!
Dude, I have a chance! Yes! So I get to the table, and I noticed, at first I said to him, I said, how you doing, you know? And he looks at my folder, and he's looking at my grade sheets and all the U's, and he's like, so what's the deal? And I have to tell you, Christina, I was so proud of my response. I kept it really, handled it professionally, and I went, and I just lost it. Now, anyone that's listening that's been in the military or been around the military will know that crying in uniform is bad. Bad. So he's like, oh, stop. And so I sucked it up, and he looks at me and he goes, do you want this? Now in my head, that voice in my head's going, duh, why would I still be here if I didn't want this? But my response to him was just simply, oh, yes. And he goes, okay, I'm going to teach you. Now, he taught me one thing, Christina, and you might know, maybe flying airplanes is not as tricky with airplanes, but he taught me one thing that let me hover that day. Do you want to know what that is?
Oh, you betcha.
So if you were to take your right hand and raise it up in the air, and bring your elbow down against your rib cage. So your arm is tight against your body, and your rib cage is now a pivot. Your elbow to your rib cage is now a pivot point. And you rotate it forward. That's where your cyclist would be. How far and hard can you move that wrist when your elbow is braced against your rib?
Not very far.
Not very far. He taught me how to brace my elbow. And that one thing stabilized my wrist and my platform for hovering so that I could hover that day. And I hovered that day, and I did every maneuver with him that week and learned more than I had in the previous 6 weeks with the other instructor.
Awesome.
So when the other instructor came back the next week, he couldn't fail me. I knew just enough to pass. Now, I got to tell you, it was not pretty. It was pretty ugly, if anything, because I didn't have experience practicing it right. I had been practicing it wrong when the other instructor not teaching me. 2 lessons in there. The first is that when you practice something, make sure you're practicing it right. If you're not doing it correctly and you're practicing it, you're just learning a bad habit.
Yeah. of which you got to unlearn.
Right, and it's not going to serve you well. The other lesson, because I went from being first in the class in my candidate school to now in flight school being last. I finished that course in last place. But guess what? On the following Monday, I was right there with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so happy to be there. I had felt like I had accomplished something so massive and finished last. And so the other lesson for you and your listeners, Christina, is that you don't have to be first to feel like a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling like a winner or feeling successful completely comes from inside of you. When we compare ourselves to someone else, all we're doing is letting that feeling of success, that sense of satisfaction, we're handing it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's absolutely no reason to do that, because let me tell you, when we compare ourselves to someone else, there is always someone that is smarter, drives a better car, has a bigger house, has greener grass, has a bigger company, has more clients, has more hair. I mean, no matter what it is, with absolutely very few exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Who has more money? Well, one guy has the most money in the whole planet, and everybody else looks at him and goes, oh, I wish I had that. We compare ourselves. There's always going to be somebody that has more. So why do we even do it?
Yeah, it's nuts, totally. I have to ask you what's come up for me, because I know for me this is a big thing for starting flight training. Did you have any fear? Because you weren't looking to start flying or had a passion that, oh, I want to fly someday. Did you ever have a fear of flying, or how did that work out? When you got up there, did you just totally feel comfortable with the experience?
So I can't tell you that I ever, of course I've had fear,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I've felt things, you feel things, but here's what fear does. Fear does not prevent you from doing things. Fear heightens your awareness of what you're doing.
Mm.
In a situation when your body and your brain are saying, you need to pay attention, this is difficult, dangerous, careful, whatever. Fear, people say, oh, no fear, no fear. Fear feeds you. It provides adrenaline. It provides energy. It can be channeled into positive things.
Yes, I could totally see that. And when I'm flying, especially in the beginning, I was never more present in my entire life than when when I first started.
That's right. That's right, and that's one of the big things that I teach, is that your life and your business is a lot like flying.
Emotionally.
But what we emotionally everything. But what we do, the mistake we make in life or in business, is we put things on autopilot and we just drift and react.
Mm-hmm.
When to be able to really create, I won't say successful, because that's up to you what success is, but to create wealth or create a thriving business or to create something that you're happy with, to take things to a higher level and achieve your goals, that requires you to be fully present in your decisions and your communications and what you do. Stop trying to type emails while you're watching TV. Stop do so many things and focus on and be fully present in the things that you do, and you will accomplish them in shorter time and be able to be more effective at what you do, just like we are when we fly.
Very, very true. So tell us, what made you transition from being a pilot into a motivational speaker? It's a big change.
Yeah, it's a huge change. First, I want to tell you, I miss flying every single day. And if it hadn't been for a career-ending injury, I would still be flying.
Wow, what happened?
While I was in Germany, and we were on a Kosovo deployment, and I was a single parent of my daughter, who was 4, and my daughter has this enormously bubbly personality, and was just this little social butterfly. And everyone in my unit loved my daughter. I mean, they just loved her, and she was like absorbed like family, which is what you do when you're stationed overseas. Is you become family with your coworkers. Well, my commander really loved her and what I was doing. And so he recommended that I be rear detachment. So I basically handled the deployment from Germany instead of being in Kosovo. And then I traveled back and forth and did paperwork and did all that. Well, during that time, or right before that, I thought I had a summer cold, and it was just would not go away. So finally, because pilots don't like to go to the doctor because the doctor says you can't fly until you're better. So we usually wait till we're really sick to go to the doctor. So the doctor says, you've got a sinus infection. I'm like, what's that? Because I'd never had one before. And you have a sinus infection, you can't fly, we're going to give you some antibiotics. Well, the problem was that the sinus infection had already become so deep-seated that it didn't respond to antibiotics. And so by the time I came back, it was already getting worse. I went back to the doctor, it was already getting worse. And it just, this cycle, we'll give you stronger antibiotics. And it just kept getting worse. And it just continued until finally, and this was over a 6-month period, finally we had a scan done, and they found out I had blockage. And it was actually, the infection was so deep that it was solidified into like a rock. And so I was very ill. And now your sinus infection is separated from your brain by only a thin, like a cartilage. It's not bone, or it's like a membrane. And I didn't know until later that if that infection had passed through that membrane, I would have had a brain infection and could have died. So I'm very lucky that it didn't happen. But I finally had to have surgery to remove all the infection that was impacted. And then with the infection gone, I was still having some issues. The sinus pressure was gone. Oh, man. Good to be gone. And I felt better with that, but my ear hurt. And it felt like it was full of water. Everything was like tinny and tunnely, and I couldn't hear very good out of it, and I started getting the tinnitus, the ringing in the ear, and all these things with this one ear. And I don't know if they've happened before, because the sinus pressure was so bad I was barely functioning. So from the sinus pain, I'd lost like 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, and trust me, ladies, it's not the way to lose it.
No.
I looked, in fact, when the unit came back from deployment and they saw me, they thought I had cancer. I looked so pale and emaciated from the infection. And I felt still afterwards, I wasn't getting that wasn't getting better. And anyway, long story short, they finally ended up diagnosing me with inner ear damage and eustachian tube damage. And the military doctor said the German doctor screwed up the surgery, and when he did my sinus, he screwed up my eustachian tube and the inner ear. And the German doctor, who was, by the way, very good, the German doctor said, you had infection raging in your head for 6 months. Of course, there's scar tissue built up. And your eustachian tube, that flap will open, and then your ear, it's open to your ear. So of course you have some additional damage. The damage is permanent and irreparable. So, so then they tried to keep me in to sit in operations and be logistics or operations. And I'm just going, do I really want to sit behind a desk scheduling other people's flights and watching them walk by every day? No, I don't think so. I was actually medically retired out of the military right before September 11th.
Wow. Are you able to fly at all now, or you can't go near flying at all, like even for pleasure?
The Department of Defense reported my medical condition to the FAA, and they pulled I had a commercial instrument rotary wing rating to be able to fly civilian, and they pulled my medical.
Wow. So
the only way I could fly now is if I were to pay an instructor and fly with an instructor. So no.
Yeah, but it's not dangerous for you to take out go on a trip somewhere and maybe get on an airplane somewhere. You wouldn't get hurt by flying your inner ear or anything.
No, the incredible thing is that my eustachian tube is actually damaged open. So it's all open. So I have to be more careful swimming.
Oh.
Because if I get water up in my sinuses, it'll go straight into my ear. So because of that, I have to really be careful with swimming, and I can't scuba and things like that. I've learned I can't do. No, I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. I mean, maybe in the future, you never know. I've heard of some of my friends getting special issuance for medicals that have been denied. Maybe someday you'll be in the air again.
Well, one of the procedures they wanted to do with me was an experimental procedure where they severed the nerve in that ear,
Mm-hmm.
prevent you from getting vertigo and having issues with it, but then it would completely eliminate all hearing. And I still have a little bit, like 20%. So I can still at least hear somebody talking even though I don't know what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I refused the surgery because I said, what if, 10, 20 years from now, they figure out a surgery to fix it?
Yeah.
And if you sever my nerve, it would never be able to be fixed. And I'll take my chances,
Yeah,
I've
totally.
healed someday. So I took my chances.
Sounds like a good plan. Now that you found you couldn't fly and you left the military, how did you decide to start doing motivational speaking? How did that come about?
Well, it came about kind of organically because, well, first I immediately got a corporate job, which we were kind of in a little mini recession back then. It was when the dot-com bubble burst.
Mm-hmm.
And then after September 11th, things kind of even got worse. But I was able to walk right into a job. And so I was working in a corporate job, but then as people in the community found out that I was a woman helicopter pilot, hey, will you come talk to my Girl Scout troop? Oh, hey, will you come talk to my school? Come talk at my career day. And so I started doing all these little talks around whenever I wasn't working or could make arrangements with work. And at the same time, because I'd kind of learned my lesson in the military to not put all your eggs in one basket, and I started a second part-time business on the side. I was a single parent with my daughter, who at that age was 6. I was a single parent. I worked a full-time job, and I started my own business up on nights and weekends so that I could have a backup plan, a plan B. So I had all of these things going on, and I was doing some speaking and things here and there. And I ended up growing that little part-time business. I ended up choosing a direct sales company. I worked my way up through that company and became one of their top performers and became one of their trainers while I was still working full-time.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I actually started doing training at so I would use all my vacation time to go do training for them and be able to do both. And then eventually I got laid off from my corporate job. They closed the whole division down, and we all got laid off. And everybody else was like, oh, I'm getting laid off. And I'm like, yes, I could work on their business and sleep, So at that point, it had grown to the point where I was just so busy all the time, and I'd actually even hired someone to help me because the other business was so busy, but it still didn't replace that corporate income and benefits. But I went ahead and took the leap and started working full time on that business, and through that, my corporate training, my speaking got really polished and really improved, and then people started saying, wait a second, you were a helicopter pilot? I want to hear those stories.
Yeah.
And so it kind of developed, and then that company hired me as a contract trainer, and I traveled the country with their CEO. And the CEO, one night at dinner after speaking, I did the motivational and sales training, and she talked about the company. And we had dinner, and she looks at me, and she goes, we love you, and we don't want to lose you. You know that. And I'm like, oh, no, she's firing me,
Oh, no.
And she goes, you have a gift you're not fully utilizing. You have a gift this world needs. And you need to consider doing speaking full time. And I was like, wow. My husband had been telling me that for a while. This is the keeper husband, by the way.
Aww.
My husband had been telling me that for a while, and that, hey, you need to speak full time. You really got a gift. And oh yeah, you're just my husband. You'll say that because you love me. But when it came from the CEO of a major company, that's what really opened my eyes to the possibility. And then I just kind of I researched it. How do you become one? I talked to speaker's agent and a speaker's bureau, and I sat down and said, okay, what do I need to do? And they gave me a plan. And so then I made the plan and I prioritized it and I worked that plan. And from talking with people in the industry that have been in the industry a long time, they said that I basically did 5 years worth of work in 2 years.
Wow.
And have gotten where I'm at right now in my speaking is where somebody who would be after 5 years normally.
Do you believe that your training in the military helped with having to constantly, you're leading the airplane of sorts, and you really have to think on your feet as well as also starting your own company?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's a little bit of everything. I think the fact that I had the military experience and the discipline and the multitasking and the different experiences I had in the military completely set me up to be as successful as an entrepreneur, and then the entrepreneurial experience of running a business set me up for now having not only being a speaker, but running a successful speaking business, which is a whole nother thing than just saying you're a speaker.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. What do you feel is the biggest takeaway you've gained through all of your experience in the military, running your own business, being a speaker?
Good question, Christina. I would say that the biggest one is if you see an opportunity, to make a difference, to step up and take some initiative in the leadership, don't wait to get appointed or asked or elected. Just step up and take the initiative. I have a little saying that I say in my speeches, and it's one of my closing lessons, and there's a long story about almost crashing the helicopter that ties with that.
Oh, tell us.
You have time for a long story?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I was in Fort Drum, New York for one of my first duty assignments. Have you ever been there? You're up.
No.
No? Fort Drum, New York is upstate, up 23 miles south of Canada, and it snows every month but July. It is cold. I knew I was in trouble when they issued me my house, and they issued me my own snowblower with the house. A snowblower. Not a lawnmower, a snowblower. And I knew I was in trouble. So we were there, and it snowed 5 feet of snow on Mother's Day one year in May. 5 feet, not drifting, accumulation. It's almost as tall. I was just my eyes were just over the snow. It was insane. So we got all kinds of crappy weather. Well, I was there during the 1998 Great North American Ice Storm. This ice storm was a monster. It was one of those storms that they said would only happen every 75 years. It actually came through. We knew it was coming, so we hangared all the helicopter and got everything kind of battened down. And we got 115 hours of freezing rain. Now, I live in Texas now. And in Texas, if we get 1 hour of freezing rain, people don't go to work for days, and the grocery stores run out of bread and milk. Everything shuts down. But up there, we got 115 hours of rain. That was freezing rain. So 4 inches thick of accumulation. 4 inches. So the huge metal superstructure power lines, under the weight of that ice, they crumpled like they were made of paper. The power lines were because that was all the infrastructure, the whole area was completely without power. The whole electricity infrastructure was decimated. Then on top of that, with the ice so thick, the snow plows couldn't dig underneath the ice to the road to try to break it up, like an icebreaker would. And the salt they use up there to clear the ice, it wouldn't penetrate through 4 inches. For days, the area was completely impassable, and yet people were without power, and it was freezing cold.
Wow.
Fort Drum buried their power lines, and we were self-sustained because of security reasons. So we actually had power, and we were operational. Well, we received a call from the governor's office. The governor needed 2 aircraft to fly an hour and a half south below the freeze line down to Albany and be staged out of Albany for the governor. And we would be, for FEMA, the governor, congressmen, journalists, and be basically at their beck and call during that week. We started planning the mission. I got the call, I had to go in, and we started planning the mission. Now, the mission was going to be really tricky, Christina, because we were flying in the clouds, and clouds are made of
Rain,
water,
vapor.
and clouds are made of water, and the temperature was below freezing.
Whoa, ice. Bad.
Bad. Airplanes, helicopters, ice, bad.
Very bad.
So we were going to be flying in the clouds, instruments, in icing. Well, that's no problem because the Black Hawk has a sophisticated anti-icing system. You see, it takes the hot air off the engines, and it's pretty hot, but it needs both engines to do this at full operational power because to be hot enough for the air to stay hot because it gets sucked into a little tube and goes up into the rotor system.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be our anti-icing system to prevent ice from forming on the blades in flight. How are you feeling about that? Feeling pretty confident?
Not really. I'm really scared of ice on wings and such.
Kind of scary. That's our anti-icing, but we plan the flight. We're going to fly instruments in the clouds, in ice for the first 45 minutes. The second 45 minutes we'll be flying visually, and we won't be in icing because we'll be out of the clouds. And when there's no clouds and no ice, no water, and it's below freezing, we can still fly. It's a IFR to VFR flight plan. So we plan everything, we get everything signed off, real-time mission, we take off. Now, I'm in the right seat. The pilot in command's in the left seat. It's his choice which seat he wants to fly in. He wants the left seat. He's the pilot in command, but we're the same rank. And in the back is the colonel. The colonel's like 4 levels up in the command.
Mm-hmm.
And he is from our brigade level, and he is in charge. He's the liaison to the governor. He's the one the governor's going to talk to. They don't want to talk to us. They want to talk to him. So I said, okay. Before we take off, who's in charge, Christina?
The guy in the back seat.
No?
No?
The pilot in command is in charge. The pilot, it's just like a captain of the ship. The captain of the ship is in charge, even passengers outrank him. So
okay.
When we get on the ground, then the colonel's in charge.
Ah, okay.
Okay? So we get ready to take off. We take off. We turn on have our engines at full operational power. We turn on the anti-ice. We take off and we get into the icing. But everything's okay. We're going along. We're on air traffic control because we're in the clouds. And about 20 minutes into the flight, we hear,
Uh-oh. Don't like that sound.
Bad sound. We went, oh, shoot. And I was on the controls, and I didn't feel anything wrong with the controls. And the pilot in command panicked. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! We have fire! Okay, reset the master caution in case anything else goes wrong, and let's figure out what's wrong. And we finally figured out that we had fluctuating RPM on engine 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're in your car and you press the gas and release the gas and press the gas and release the gas, you fluctuate the RPM, and you hear a difference in the engine. It would go, vroom, vroom, right?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, we've heard that before. So you hear the difference in the fluctuation as the RPMs go higher and lower. And the gauge was going up and down like it was on a trampoline, going up and down. Engine 1 is over my head. Now, if you can hear your car engine, do you think I could hear a jet engine over my head?
I'm guessing you can.
I could. And it was holding steady. So immediately I knew from my emergency procedures that it was a chip malfunction. The data goes raw into a chip, and the chip configures it for the gauges in our cockpit, just like our cars do. Raw data into a computer, and the computer says, this is what your gauge needs to say, and it does it with split-second accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
Except we had a chip failure. And engine 1, up and down, up and down. The pilot in command, he goes, oh, emergency procedure for fluctuating RPM is to pull the engine back to idle.
Mm-hmm.
In icing, reducing the temperature, making the anti-icing not
Oh, ineffective. Oh, more icing. Bad. Now I get it. Okay.
So we would have lost our anti-icing capability
And probably gone down.
and most definitely probably would have gone down. So I'm like, I start arguing with him. No, I don't think we should do that. I'm pretty sure it's just a chip malfunction because I can hear the engines and I know the detailed emergency procedure, not on the checklist, and that this is what we need to do. It's okay. And he's still in panic mode. No, the emergency procedure says I have to pull back the engine to idle. And he reaches up and grabs the throttles up in the ceiling panel.
Mm-hmm.
So what do, Christina? Your pilot in command, he's in charge.
I'd knock him out, man. I'm not going down.
Well, I didn't knock him out. I did, and I'll probably blow out the microphone here to say it. So I did say, don't touch that throttle. If you want to wait until we're out of the ice and flying visually, we can fly on one engine, but we can't fly on one engine in icing. And I am not going down today. So don't touch it. Well, he just, but I said, look it up in the book. Because then I knew my procedures, and I knew in the book that the detailed procedure said, check your engine temperature, listen for your engines, and check for a chip malfunction as a non-critical procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, rah, 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 and he pulls the book, and I'm still flying on the controls, and he pulls the book, and he's looking through, and I said, you want to pull it back when we're out of the clouds, you just let me know. Now, he was the boss, but I wasn't willing to die, so I stood up to him. I saw the need, and I led. And so we continue to fly, and we get out of the clouds, and we're flying visually, and I'm waiting to hear, is he gonna have me do that? And nothing. And we finally get into final approach into Albany, New York, and he goes, crew chief, would you please write up this aircraft for a signal data converter chip malfunction?
Sure thing.
I'm like, good idea. So we land, we write it up, we get the part in, and a couple days later, the colonel that was in the back comes up to me and says, Chief Mac, we need you to fly this mission. You're going to go here. I pull out my notepad. I always carry it on me, and I start taking notes, and I say, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And then I go take it to the pilot in command to fly the mission, to plan the mission, and to find out which part he wants me to do, because he's the pilot in command.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, the same thing. Every mission, the same thing. Finally, at the end of the week, the colonel says to me, Chief Mack in my office. Well, we were visiting the airfield. His office was a closet.
Mm.
So I go in the closet with him, which sounds really bad. But anyway, I went in and talked to him, and I said, yes, sir. And he goes, why didn't you tell me you were not the pilot in command? What did you say to that? I'm like, sir, I didn't know you didn't know. He goes, all week I thought you were the pilot in command because of how you handled yourself in that aircraft on the flight down. And I just looked at him. He goes, yeah, I was on the radios. I was listening to what was going on. And I don't know if you know this, but I used to fly Blackhawks before I flew a jet. So I knew what was going on. And if you hadn't stopped him when you did, I was going to stop him.
Oh, good.
Good job.
Awesome.
At times like that, there are times in your life when opportunities are put in front of you. Are you going to take them? Are you going to step up when you're needed? Are you going to wait for somebody else to step up first? Are you going to wait to be elected? Are you going to wait until you're nominated? Are you going to wait until you're appointed? Because when you see that need, it's put in front of you for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Just step up and lead.
That's great, because you know how many people out there will be in a situation where it's dire and their intuition and everything in them is screaming to take action, but they're like, no, I won't take action. I'm not ready, or I'm not the leader, or I'm not this. If anyone is in a position that sees something that isn't right, they should step forward and say something, or if they can help.
Can you imagine how much better our entire country would be if everyone did this? And any country would be if people did this.
Mm.
I mean, worst case, if you're stepping up for what's a greater good or what you believe is right, typically, And now, mind you, typically, I know there's exceptions. I know I don't mean to talk in generalities, but typically, even if it's overstepping your bounds a little bit, your boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be thanked for it, not shot down for it. And even if you're shot down for it, even if someone stepped into somebody else's job and they're egocentric and can't handle it, you've still done something for the greater good.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a wonderful, wonderful story, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. I'm glad we had for it.
Awesome. Well, do you have any last words of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Ooh. So the one thing that I want everyone to really, really know is that it all starts within you. You're at the place you're at. You've got everything where you've been has gotten you where you're at right now. And where you're at right now, this very second as you're listening to this, is a beautiful place because it's where you're starting from. And every second of every minute of every hour of every day, you have the opportunity to start taking a new action and making a change. You just have to decide to do it and step up to the line and take action.
That is great advice. No better time than today to take action. And don't fault where you are today because it's perfect. It's where you're starting. Just start where you are today, wherever you are, and go forward. Thank you again, Elizabeth McCormick, for coming out and sharing your wonderful story. And thank you for coming on Savvy Central Radio.
Thank you for having me. I hope all you listeners got something good from there.
Join us this Monday, March 18th, where our guest will be Andy Harmelin of AI Consulting, LLC.